Thank you so much for joining us for today's press conference with the leader of the Green and Party candidate, Annamie Paul.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Thank you for being with us. Merci d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Today I am on the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. Je suis sur les territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat. More specifically, I'm here in the village. Our campaign office is just around the corner. I'm here in Barbara Hall Park, just beside the 519, which is one of the iconic community centers in this area. And I'm here today pleading for the lives of people in our community and in communities like this and many other kinds of communities all across Canada. The cameras may not see it from their angle, but usually when you look around in the park between cleanings, you'll see the ground glistening. And the ground is glistening not because of some trick of the eye, but it's glistening because of the broken vials and the broken pipes that you often see in the park. The vials and the pipes that make this the most cleaned park in all of Toronto. And so in the heart of this community, this wonderful, generous, civic-minded community, people are suffering and people are dying because of what the federal government has not done to date in order to address the drug poisoning epidemic that has consumed our country. Even as we talk about the climate emergency and even as we tackle the health emergency that is the pandemic, we cannot forget this emergency that has taken tens of thousands of lives over the past year. Here in Toronto alone, there were 521 drug poisoning deaths, or sometimes we say opioid-related deaths. This is a 78% increase from 2019 and over 200% increase from 2015. So this is a problem that has gotten worse and worse and worse year on year, and the pandemic lit a match that is causing a raging fire of epidemic within this community and others. In the month of May alone in Toronto, in the course of just a few days, there were 13 drug poisoning deaths. And we now average approximately 17 opioid related deaths or drug poisoning deaths per day in Canada. And so it is time for us to acknowledge that what we are doing is not working, that the pandemic has made it worse, and that if we want to save lives that can be saved, then we need to take action now. There is a growing chorus around taking action. And before I mention more of that, let's just say why we talk about drug poisoning. Drug poisoning is the term that we use because we know that the supply is contaminated. And so people who are using are not overdosing so much as they are being poisoned to death by the supply that's available, which has gotten worse during the pandemic because of supply issues, and people don't have the same access to safe injection sites. And so we're seeing the results of that. Alors, nous sommes dans une autre pandémie, nous sommes dans une épidémie, c'est l'épidémie d'empoisonnement qui est liée à la contamination de notre approvisionnement de drogue. Ici à Toronto, on a eu plus de 500 fatalités en 2020 associées à l'empoisonnement. On sait que la pandémie a créé une situation énormément sévère. L'approvisionnement n'est pas sécuritaire. Les gens n'ont pas le même accès à les sites d'injection et on voit les résultats. Ce qu'on fait ne fonctionne pas. Il faut le reconnaître et il faut agir. And so what do? We know what we need to do. There is a consensus about what we need to do. The healthcare experts, those who work in with drug users, the families who have lost their loved ones to this scourge, they have all said very clearly to the federal government and to every party what we must do. First, we decriminalize. Criminalization of a health issue turns it into a criminal issue. And this is a health issue, not a criminal issue. Criminalization creates stigma. It prevents people from getting the help that they need, from asking for the help that they need, from acknowledging that they need help. So we must decriminalize. We must never refer to drug users again as offenders, as they continue to be referred to by the Liberal Party and the Liberal government. These are not offenders, they are users, they are members of our communities, and they need help. Secondly, we create a national safe supply of drugs of choice. National safe supply because we know that people are being poisoned to death. That even if we decriminalize simple possession, if we do not ensure that the drugs that are consumed are safe, then we will continue to see members of our community dying of poisoning. And drugs of choice, because we know that users want access to their drugs of choice and that the alternatives that are provided through some supply programs simply are not going to appeal to drug users. So it must be drugs of choice. And once we have decriminalized simple possession and created that national safe supply, it must go hand in hand with wraparound services. Safe supply, safe injection sites, access to mental health services, access to community supportive housing, access to drug treatment. All of these things must go hand in hand. All of these things have been underinvested in. All of these things need to be part of the solution. Alors, il faut décriminaliser parce que c'est une question de santé et pas une question criminelle. Il faut éliminer le stigma. Il faut assurer que les gens ont accès à leur drogue de choix et que c'est un approvisionnement sécuritaire. Parce que sinon, les gens vont continuer à tourner vers les rues, continuer à tourner vers un approvisionnement qui n'est pas sécure. Ils vont continuer à s'empoisonner. Et puis, on doit ajouter l'accès à un logement avec accès à des services de santé mentale, accès à des services de conseillage aussi. On doit assurer qu'on a tous les soutiens pour les utilisateurs parce qu'on sait que c'est comme ça qu'on va vraiment assurer que les gens ont des choix. And then education. It's important to educate the people of Canada about the need for the first few measures that I mentioned. That being said, this is one of those areas where the people of Canada are far ahead of the policymakers. There is no community that has been untouched by this epidemic. No community. It is why we have seen coroners across the country, big city mayors across the country, chiefs of police across the country, etc., calling for decriminalization, precisely because we understand what it seems like many of the parties and policymakers don't, which is that we need change in order to save lives, and we have all the tools that we need. And so let this be the moment that we make that change. The Green Party of Canada called for these changes to be made in the last Parliament. Had we been returning to Parliament in September, as opposed to being thrown into this unnecessary and selfish election, then we could have been getting people in Canada the help they need, because we can expect 17 more people in Canada to die today, unnecessarily, because of the action that we haven't taken. Alors, c'est le moment d'agir. Le Parti vert, ça fait des années qu'on fait l'appel pour la décriminalisation et un approvisionnement sûr et sécuritaire. C'est le moment de le faire. We have all that we need. What we need now is political will that will save lives. We can start today. We should do it today. And the Green Party of Canada, as always, is ready to work with all parties on this urgent issue, this public health emergency, one that should be declared a national health emergency. We hope that this community and the people who live in this community can count on the support of all political parties to get the help that members of this community need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Renee and Paul. We will now move on to questions from the ground. I have James Murray from CBC.
Good afternoon. Do you mean legalization of all drugs, including things like fentanyl, carfentanil, where a tiny speck that would fit on the end of my baby finger could kill you? Do you mean legalization of all of it?
So what we're calling for is the decriminalization of simple possession of all illicit drugs.
So legalization.
We're calling for the decriminalization of simple possession of all illicit drugs. That's not the same thing as legalization, but what we're asking for is for the elimination of the legal penalties that are attached to it. This is a public health issue. It's not a criminal issue. We've seen that approach does not work. We've seen that it pushes people into the shadows. We need them to come out of the shadows, and then we need to make sure that we get them the help that they need when they're ready to ask for it. And in the meantime, that they have a safe supply. No one's going to use a drug that's laced with fentanyl, and we know that the street supply is completely laced with fentanyl. If they have an alternative of the same drug that they can be guaranteed is safe and secure.
And do you think it is the federal government's job to make sure all, even recreational drugs, are safe, to monitor the supply?
I believe that we have seen that fentanyl has creeped into the drug supply, period, full stop. I don't see any indication, neither do the public health experts or our coroners or the province of British Columbia, who was already asked for this exemption under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. There's no reason to believe that fentanyl is going to be exiting our supply anytime soon. It's showing up in very unexpected places. And so, yes, I believe that it is the role of the government, given what we know about what works, to ensure that there is a safe supply, an uncontaminated supply of drugs of choice for users.
Et votre réponse en français pour Radio-Canada, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, absolument. Alors d'abord, c'est très important qu'on approche cet enjeu comme un enjeu de santé publique et pas d'une question criminelle. On parle de la décriminalisation, c'est différent que la légalisation. Ça veut dire que la possession simple pour l'utilisation personnelle devrait être sans des pénalités criminelles. On met avec ça parce qu'on doit avoir les deux choses. On doit avoir aussi un approvisionnement sécuritaire. Parce qu'on sait que le fentanyl a entré dans dans tous les réseaux, dans tous les différents types de drogues. Il n'y a pas de raison de croire que ça va sortir dans l'avenir proche. Alors, on doit assurer que si les gens consomment des drogues, qu'ils ont accès à un approvisionnement sûr, c'est comme ça que nous allons sauver les vies.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. That concludes questions from the ground. Over to you, Rosie, in the digital Zoom room.
Okay, yes, we have Alison Jones from Canadian Press who'd like to ask you a question, Ms. Paul. Alison, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much. Hi, Ms. Paul.
Hello.
The Canadian Press is hearing that the Green Party won't have a full slate of candidates to run in the election. Why is that the case, and exactly how many do you expect to have on the ballot on election day?
Thanks for the question. I believe the numbers are still being calculated, so I can't give you an accurate total at this moment. I know that there's certain procedures with Elections Canada that are still underway. We expect that we are going to fall short of a full slate of candidates. By how much, we're still determining. There's no question that for a smaller party like ours, when you have an election under these circumstances, that it's more challenging. We had enough candidates step forward for a full slate, and then we ran into challenges in terms of collecting signatures in all of the ridings, particularly remote ridings or ridings where we're dependent upon seniors who volunteer with us, who are very nervous in provinces like Alberta and out west where COVID numbers are spiking. And then part of it, it's important also to acknowledge is that, I mean, certainly it's no secret that we've had our own distractions internally, which certainly made it more difficult for us to get to that full slate. And I want to acknowledge that as well. But those things combined, and so we think that we will have approaching a full slate, but not a completely full slate of candidates. We're very grateful to all of those who stepped forward to run. I'm very excited to be supporting them all, and I thank them for putting their names forward.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Alison, please?
I do. Thanks so much. Can you elaborate at all on how the party's internal troubles led to this situation?
Well, anything that isn't focused on in an election year on election readiness has the potential. It isn't necessarily, but has the potential to be a distraction or to be a resource draw from that work. And so certainly the energy that was placed in areas that weren't related to election preparedness certainly drew some of our time away from that. And so, you know, again, it's important to say that I try to be as straightforward about these things as possible. It's not the only consideration, as I said. We are a significantly smaller party than the others, and of course, the entire way that this election cycle has been designed to favor first and foremost the incumbent party, but then also to favor larger parties. We know that our system is deliberately difficult for smaller parties to establish themselves. So for us, those factors, whether it's having volunteers in those remote locations, their concerns about being out in the community during COVID, the distractions that, again, not distractions, preoccupations that many were facing at this moment out in places where there are droughts or forest fires or all the things that we know that are happening right now, meant that for us, we had more of a struggle this time. But we're excited about the slate we have. We think that it's going to be a good final number. And perhaps I'll underline now, and hopefully I'll have more information soon about it. We worked very hard through our Time to Run campaign to ensure that this was a very diverse slate of candidates. That's something that's been very important for me. We also took a little more time getting off the ground with our nominations in order to make sure that we were more diverse and inclusive. And so I'm confident that that will have yielded results, and I'm confident that we will have a diverse slate of candidates when we get to announce the full slate.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Thank you, Alison. Are there any other questions on Zoom? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Si vous voulez utiliser la fonction de lever la main pour demander une question, if you could just use the raised hand feature if there are any more questions. No? Okay, il n'y a pas de questions. No more questions, Ms. Paul. Back to you.
Bon, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for joining us today.